It's a privilege to be here today to welcome you all to our third and final, for now, accountability dialogue. I want to just take a few minutes to thank all the people that made this possible. First, our funders. These dialogues have been supported by the Susan Schechter Memorial Fund and the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act office, led by Shondell Dawson, who we would also like to thank directly for her long-term vision and support for families experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. We'd also like to thank the planning team that we at Latinos United for Peace and Equity were honored to be a part of, along with UJIMA, Women Transforming Families, and Futures Without Violence. And I'd like to particularly call out DJ and Claire for their tangible support that otherwise we would not have been able to have these dialogues. I'd like to also make sure that we thank Rebecca Sanchez for her beautiful artwork that you have seen in the marketing and advertising of this session. And I want to thank all the participant survivors, Jay Story, Yolanda Wardle-Georges, Charlene Nicholson, Teresa Nord, and Selena Hernandez. It feels relevant now as well, before I go on with just a few other thank yous, to announce that Latinos United for Peace and Equity has received an award from FIPSA to launch and operate the National Center to Advance Peace for Children, Youth, and Families, where we will get to implement a multi-level approach to provide the best possible source of information and assistance to those working in the field of child protection and custody, so that we can continue these conversations and create ensure that cases involving domestic violence are handled in a manner that recognizes the complex legal, cultural, and psychological dynamics of domestic violence. Selena Hernandez specifically provided her testimony and will lend her expertise to the project as the lead advisory member to the Center's advisory committee. So we are very happy that she will be with us in a leadership role, as will many of the Women Transforming Family leaders. We would also like to thank all the policymakers, Paula Julian, judges Aurora Martinez-Jones and Michelle Demmer, Rosie Hidalgo, Joyce McMillan, Jo Yang Chun, Aisha Schomburg, Claire Anderson, all who provided impactful contributions and do important work. So we thank you. Also want to thank the advocates that have been instrumental to this project: Melissa Sampson-Greer, Lashetta Johnson, Patrice Lucas, and also thank our moderator, Isa Wilder-Georges, who has been doing a fantastic job. And also you, the audience, for sharing this time with us. It's the most valuable thing you can give us, is your attention to this very important issue. So lastly, I'd like to thank Aria Muria for her leadership on this project. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to her for our next introduction. Erica.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ruby. Good afternoon. I am Erica Maria, a survivor of violence and the child welfare system. I am a domestic violence and sexual assault advocate and executive director of the nonprofit organization Supreme Transitions, residing in Detroit, Michigan. Over the past 2 years, it has been a privilege and an honor to participate as a fellow in the WTF Revolt, Women Transforming Families, Rising to End Violence, Oppression, and the Legacy of Trauma Emerging Leaders cohort. Women Transforming Families centers on 3 populations: Texas, Minnesota, and Michigan. Elevating the issues that are the concerns of the communities, we embrace the issue of prevention and to stop people from being in the child welfare system. Having the opportunity to co-design the accountability dialogues with Futures Without Violence, UJIMA, and Latinos United for Peace and Equity has been phenomenal and empowering. I want to share with you that the women who participated and shared their experiences on day 1, Justice is Truth, received resources at a national rate and culturally specific trauma-informed services to meet their immediate and ongoing needs. Out of respect for their privacy, we chose to disable the chat function. Welcome to day 3 of the 3-part series. Justice is truth, justice is accountability, justice is prevention. I hope clarity and understanding is obtained and that a fire is lit to bring justice to families with these intersecting experiences. And now it is my honor to present you with a special message from a very special person, someone who I respect so deeply that I wrote a love letter to her for fighting for her seat at the highest tables in our nation. It is with extreme joy and honor that I introduce Madam Vice President Kamala Harris to share opening remarks. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. And to the one and only Esther Solar, thank you for your long-standing friendship and your leadership. And to everyone, thank you for joining in this very important conversation. So during the month of October and throughout the year, we work for a future without violence. We honor the courage and resilience of survivors. We honor the dedication of advocates and service providers. And together, we commit and we recommit to building a nation in which survivors are fully supported, domestic violence is never tolerated, and where all people can live free from the fear of violence. The President and I have both made this work our life's work. As you all know, the President was the author of the Violence Against Women Act. And as for me, well, from the courtroom to the boardroom of Partners Ending Domestic Abuse, from the State House to the White House, I've always worked to put an end to violence. So when the President and I took office, and we saw that domestic violence had become a pandemic within a pandemic, we immediately set out to do something about it. Through our American Rescue Plan, we provided a historic $1 billion in supplementary funding to support survivors and service providers and shelters during COVID-19. Now, through our Build Back Better agenda, we are working to increase economic security for women and families, to increase funding for critical Department of Justice grant programs for domestic violence and sexual assault services, and to double our investment through the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act. At the same time, our administration is working with Congress to strengthen the Violence Against Women Act, and our Gender Policy Council is working to use every lever of government to prevent and address gender-based violence, which includes improving support for survivor-centered, trauma-informed approaches to the work. So this is a snapshot of the work that is already underway. But here's the big picture. This, I believe, is an incredible moment. It is a critical and transformational moment in our history. And as our nation and our world recovers from the pandemic, I believe that we have an opportunity now to build a better future, a future free from violence. As I said at the beginning, this has been my life's work and your life's work. You all will remember as a young prosecutor, I worked in a unit that focused on sex crimes and crimes of violence against women and children. And it's actually when I first got to know Esther so many years ago and to see her work firsthand. Back then, I spent a lot of time talking to survivors at Oakland's Highland Hospital, walking through what it would mean for them to testify. Time and again, I witnessed profound acts of courage as survivors shared their stories. So I want to end today by thanking every survivor here for being such a leader and showing such courage and making sure that these conversations continue to take place and that policy makers continue to do the hard work of fighting for a future without violence. And I know your voices are essential to the work that will be done and can be done. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Vice President Harris. I'm not sure how I ended up in this seat right after the Vice President's congratulations, but I did, and it's an honor. In case, by some odd chance, you don't know who Esther Solar is, she's the president of Futures Without Violence, and to those of us who know her, a leader in the anti-violence movement. Let me add my congratulations to Futures Without Violence and all of the partners in this work. Ujima, Women Transforming Families, Latinos United for Peace and Equity. How often is it that you get the Vice President of the United States shouting out your work? So congratulations. This is a moment. Pat yourselves on the back. Erica, I feel like I'm in tears too. Like, really? She actually said that. So if you're here with us, to all the planners and panelists and the whole planning team, congratulations. That was a wonderful message. My name's Isa Walder-Georges. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I've had the honor of being the moderator for this series. I'm a survivor. I've been a child welfare practitioner and policymaker for over 20 years of my career. I personally have only dreamed a day like this would come. This is day 3 of a groundbreaking event. If you've been with us for the 2 previous dialogues, Justice is Truth and Justice is Accountability, then you know what a powerful, real and rare experience this has been. It's been raw, it's been painful at moments, it's been honest above all. I think Rosie Hidalgo was the one who said hard and hopeful as words that she used. And for me, it's made this Domestic Violence Awareness Month deeply meaningful and inspiring. I hope it's been that for you as well. But let's recap for a moment where we've been, because the Vice President called this a transformative moment. And I want to hold on to that. I want to amplify that. We all know that movements are not made in one moment or in one story. They're made with many smaller actions over years to be ready for the right opportunities. And you all have put in the work over many years, and we have such an opportunity today. This day that's called Justice as Prevention is really rare. It's not the usual practice where you get survivors' voices leading the conversation, and then you get policymakers co-designing to, again, as the Vice President said, build a better future together. We've heard over the past 2 dialogues about the impact of the system on adult and child survivors. We've heard about the inherent disparities and the racism that are baked into the systems. We know many of the problems we heard from the women's stories are also interconnected with other oppressions: police, healthcare, education, courts, and economics, and more. We know this isn't a one systems issue. We have different points of view. We heard those differing points of view. We have places where we converge and we agree that change is due and overdue. We heard some bold new ideas from policymakers particularly, and opportunities as well. So today, these dialogues come together. We're going to speak to each other. Now, caveat, we don't expect to wrap anything up in a neat bow today, because that's not how movements work. We do want to leave here with a commitment to actions, because without actions, movements stagnate and die. We're going to dive into 2 of the biggest questions that have come out of the dialogues while keeping that in mind. One, the first big issue I want to take up is that we know that being involved with the system, particularly for women and children of color, can be very detrimental, is very detrimental. How do we prevent more adult and child survivors from getting involved in the system? We know this involves mandatory reporting, policies and laws, And it also involves definitions of neglect and failure to protect. So that's the first big question we're going to take up. And then secondly, for those that do become involved with the system, how do we help them rather than further harm them? One aspect of that is real concrete resources. As you heard Erica said, that all of the survivors that participated in this process received concrete resources and help. And we heard them say in their stories over and over again, I asked for help, and what I got was punishment. So we want to, again, come to this question of, for those involved with the system, how do we help and not harm? And then what is accountability when the system does harm survivors, child and adult? We again have a powerful group with us. We are survivors, we are advocates, we are policymakers, and we are passionate, dedicated, and committed. So I'm so glad to see you all today. There are a lot of us in the room, so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself with your name, pronouns, your role, and one value you're bringing to this meeting. One value that you're bringing to this meeting. So we're going to start with survivors, and then I'll call your name, and then you can introduce yourself, name, pronoun, and a value you're bringing to this role, and your role. Charlene?
Hi, thank you, Issa. My name is Charlene Nicholson, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence who also survived the child welfare system over 20 plus years ago. I'm also the named plaintiff in the class action lawsuit, Nicholson versus Williams. I get the opportunity to speak nationally to advocate for women and children who have been impacted by domestic violence and child welfare. One need or value that I bring to this meeting is my concern for others and my commitment to help.
Thank you, Charlene. Selena?
Hi, my name is Selena Hernandez. I am a parent, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a parent advocate and a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, and I am also a survivor of the child welfare system. One need and value that I'm bringing to this meeting is that as a Latina mother of three, I am here today to represent survivors of domestic violence and the pain that they went through when they thought that leaving a person using violence was going to end the pain, only to find out that the child welfare system would take their kids instead of helping them during their time of need. I'm here not only to advocate for my experience in the system, but to advocate for them as well.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, Selena. Appreciate it. Teresa.
Bonjour, everyone. Beniji Wangi, Biakwe Indigenous. My birth name is Teresa Nord. I am a descendant of the Navajo and Hopi Nation. I, too, am a survivor of domestic violence, sexual violence, and the child welfare system, as well as the Department of Corrections. And the value that I really can bring to the table today is my lived experience as a national speaker, as well as a co-fellow to the Women Transforming Families cohort. And I think my lived experience and what I can bring to the table is a desire for change and a voice for not only for myself and my two girls, but as well as the families that I work with. So thank you, and miigwech.
Thank you, Teresa. Jay? I didn't see her on earlier. Don't know if she's on. Potentially not. How about our wonderful advocates in the room? Missy?
Good morning, or I guess for many, maybe afternoon. I'm actually on the West Coast, so it is still morning time over here for me. My name is Melissa Sampson Greer, also known as Missy to many who are close to me. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am an advocate. I come to you as a member of the Women Transforming Families cohort with over 20 plus years of child welfare experience, as well as a member of the Yakima Nation. And so not only my child welfare experience, but my lived experience of coming from community in a tribal nation. And so the value I think I bring to this space is really hope and challenging the system in a way that how can we reimagine the system to be what it really can be. And so to do that, we must maintain hope and bring forward the voices that are needed to really impact change. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't know each other, but so I hope it's okay that I call you Missy. That's all the wonderful things I've heard. It's with the name Missy. So thank you for that. Lachetta.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lachetta Johnson. My pronouns is she, her, and hers. My role is I am an advocate, and I also work with the WTF as a cohort member. My one value that I bring is passion. Passion for the commitment of change. It was me working in the child welfare program systems as a CPS worker, sitting at my desk. And anytime I got a case that involved domestic violence, I would become livid at the possible removal of this child, re-victimizing this mother. And it was from that passion that it derived me to start my own nonprofit, the House of Cadence. And I've been doing that now for over 10 years, where we work with culturally specific Black women who are victims and survivors of domestic violence, homelessness, and the child welfare system. We provide hope. We help them heal from their traumas, and we assist them in knowing their rights. Thank you.
Thank you. And what an amazing group of advocates and leaders. Now, in terms of policymakers joining the dialogue, it's a pleasure to welcome, I can't see you, but to welcome Secretary Julian Chang.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jian Chang, Acting Assistant Secretary here at the Administration for Children and Families at HHS. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I think the value that I bring is a commitment to doing the hard work of making change possible, right? Change, as Issa said, doesn't happen overnight. It requires us to stick through it, through people pushing back at us, people asking tough questions. But I'm really committed to acting through that. I'm also committed to listening, particularly to people with lived experience, because I only know the part of the work that I know through my personal lens and my professional lens, but I know there's so much that I don't know and can learn from those with lived experience. I'm very committed to that as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Asia Schomburg. Again, an honor to welcome you to the group.
Hi, thank you so much for that. Can you all hear me? Good.
Yes, we can.
Good. Everyone, Asia Schomburg, Associate Commissioner of the Children's Bureau, she, her, hers pronouns. Really honored to be here with you all today. I think a value that I bring to the work, and I was talking to you about this recently, is love. Really talking more about love, even when we talk about systems and talking about policy making, and taking a loving approach to our children and families. And that's one thing that I've committed to in my vision for my leadership while I'm here. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Associate Commissioner. Really appreciate it. Judge Aurora Martinez Jones, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm Aurora Martinez Jones. I am the 126th State District Court Judge in Texas, which sits in Austin, Texas. And it's been an honor, really, to be a part of these dialogues. I'm really committed to looking at better ways in which we serve children and families in the child welfare system, where their voices are highlighted, and the experiences of people who have been through this system are informing decisions that I make, even as a judge, when I'm talking about systems change. So I'm very glad that we're here coming together for this conversation, because I am also here to listen, but I'm also here to find ways to be informed so I can really put into action systems change, especially in my community. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Judge Michelle Demmer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Demert. I am a tribal court judge, having presided both in Alaska, California, and Washington. I've been a tribal judge at many tribes up and down the I-5 corridor. I am also the Law and Policy Director for the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I am extremely grateful to be here today. As a practicing attorney, as a tribal judge, I have seen so many different scenarios where people of color are disproportionately involved in the system, and in an unfair way, in my opinion, in that they are not given the benefit of the doubt, and assumptions are always assumed are the worst. But for this conversation, I think the value that I would bring would be optimism. I'm so incredibly optimistic that the time is now to change the system, and in the parts are in place to get this accomplished. And, Vice President Harris's message of transformative change is just right on point today. So, Gunas Chish, I'm a citizen of the Tlingit and Haida tribe in Alaska. My village is Klawak, and Gunas Chish for allowing me to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Michelle. It's our honor. Next in the room, Joyce McMillan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joyce McMillan. I am the founder and executive director of JMAC for Families and PLAN, Parent Legislative Action Network, a coalition led by parents, people impacted, who's working to make legislative change to make the lives of those of us who have been impacted better. My value is a commitment to family preservation. I'm an advocate, activist, policy analyst, change maker, and a person who's been impacted by all of the systems. And I know it's not just one system, because they all work together to support one another. So I'm here to just break it all up and ask you for your support in doing so.
Thank you, Joyce, and welcome. Last but certainly not least, Claire Anderson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Anderson, she, her, hers. I'm a senior policy fellow at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, and I am more than delighted and humbled to be here with you all today. It is a transformative moment, and the values that I bring today are about listening, learning, and co-design in order to really step into the transformative moment that we have in front of us. I likewise am optimistic that reimagining child welfare and broader systems is possible, and we can bring into alignment policies with the tectonic shifts that have been occurring over the last 18 to 24 months through listening to survivors and to people involved with child welfare and more broadly, rather than continuing to look backwards in interpreting and administering our policies and programs. It is a new day, and it is possible. And I am thrilled to be here with you, listening and co-designing what comes ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I'm going to ask our wonderful behind the scenes and powerful tech team to show us what you have just shared with us, right? The power of a movement is its foundations, its core beliefs, and in your values, you have just shared a powerful example of what the values are of this work. So DJ, when you can. Right? You all are bringing to the roots of this movement passion, lived experience, right? Commitment to family preservation, right? I bring love. What a powerful foundation and value. How can we be doing this work without love at the table? Latina representation, right? Survivor leadership, again, optimism. Hope was said as well. You all are bringing hope. Right? That you're concerned for others, your commitment to help, right? Today's a new day. This is the moment of transformation. So I just want us to take just half a second to sit with this in terms of the power of these foundations, with what the Vice President said in terms of this transformative moment. And with this at our roots, how can we fail? Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to move further into our dialogue, right? This is equity in practice. We're talking across various levels of power, across races, ethnicities, life experiences, right? This is how equity is created, coming together at a joint table with authentic dialogue. So let's start with this first major question. What are the most important changes and opportunities we have to prevent more survivors, adult and child survivors, from entering the child welfare system, but to get the help that they've asked for? So I think I'm going to call on folks. And if you have something you want to add to that, either come off mute or raise your hand. So let's start with Claire, and let's talk about some of the concrete and economic help and resources that survivors tell us. This is what I was asking for, but instead I got something else. What would you say?
I would affirm that that is exactly what I heard in the first meeting. And I was really moved by the statement. I asked for help and believed it was coming, but it wasn't actual help. We have learned a great deal over the last 3 to 5 years about the provision of economic and concrete supports as a prevention strategy, as well as supporting families when they do come to the attention of child welfare. And I think that there are a number of ways in which we can begin to reorient the social safety net so that it is administered as it was, I think, originally intended, which is a strategy to ensure that the most intrusive government intervention is not deployed. The removal of children from their home and the interruption of, and sometimes disruption of familial bonds. So I think there are numerous ways and that we can begin to really think about economic and concrete supports as a first line strategy, as well as ensuring that it is available more robustly when there is a family crisis to support families and ensure that child welfare does not become involved.
Thank you. So I hear 2 parts to that, right? One, right, is to make sure that the resources are robust and that they're there first, and that larger systemic intervention is secondary or is the last response.
Absolutely. Transparent, accessible, robust.
Thank you. Responses, Joyce, what would you say to this strategy?
I'd say yes, but there is no real strategy if people who are being impacted don't know their rights. So for me, it's about legislating, making sure that people who are impacted by systems, regardless of the system, the first thing that happens is that they're Mirandized. And so leadership in child welfare across the United States keep talking about reducing the number of families that are separated needlessly, but then they push back against advising people of their rights. It's one thing to have the rights, and it's another thing to know the rights. And anyone in CPS or social work or any other setting that says a family knowing their rights will hinder their CPS's ability to keep a family safe is saying to me that their work is to trample on the rights of people. Because if you're doing your job and you're doing your job the right way, me knowing my rights should not hinder you knowing what's happening if something wrong is occurring. And just looking at who's impacted and for what reasons. These are not abuse cases that we keep bringing up saying, oh, kids are not going to be safe. Most cases are poverty cases being framed as neglect. So just not just having the rights, knowing the rights. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Good point. Right. I remember being in child welfare and hearing from families like, we didn't know that we could not open the door when y'all come knocking. Right. And how many families don't understand that right. Right. And feel like, oh, I have to open the door. I have to respond.
Before can I just clarify something since you said that? That's a wonderful point.
Go for it, Joyce. Yes.
Yeah, I want to clarify that because everyone who does not want change uses that as an example. Oh, families are not going to open their door and kids are going to be behind the door dying. The fact of the matter is in all 50 states, when a call comes into the registry, the caller describes what's happening. So we know if a child is at imminent risk or not. We should not be acting based on our feelings, but we should be following the law. Lawmakers should follow the law and they should ensure any agency that works for the government is following the law. The law says that CPS should have a court order if it is not a case of exigent circumstances. And therefore, we should be exercising that. Families should know their rights. Families should have the ability to say, I'm not letting you in because the Fourth Amendment protects me from allowing you into my home without a court order. And they should stomp themselves down to the court and get a court order or fax a court order, do whatever it is they do. But we should not be violating the rights of citizens under the guise of protecting children when we're creating this much harm.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification and additional information, Joyce. Want to give Missy and Selena opportunities to weigh in on this, and others can as well. Or if you want to pass, feel free to say pass.
I'm happy to jump in here first. I think, as you're asking the question, one of the first things that always comes to my mind, especially working within the system for as many years as I have, is that we as decision makers have to acknowledge that we are gatekeepers and that the decisions that we are making each and every day impact children, families, and communities. And so we are the ones who are responsible for diving deeper, right? Because I think of things like the number one question we hear, well, what does the data tell us? We know that our children are disproportionately overrepresented in the child welfare system. We know that when our children come into care, that they experience disparities at every point that decisions are made in the case. And so it is not upon us as community and as survivors to have to answer what we know, because we are living it each and every day. It's upon us as gatekeepers and the decision makers within the system to start asking the questions of why. Why is it that our system continues to perpetuate oppression? we need to acknowledge the harm that has been done to communities and to children and families. And I think we need to start asking the question every single day is, who is at the table? Because what we've learned here is that it's the qualitative data. It's the stories of our survivors that is telling us the truths of the experience of our system. We have to really hear that, not just listen to it, right? Because listening means we're probably already formulating the questions that in our responses that we have back, but really truly hearing what our survivors had to say. And so each and every day that we're at a table and we know that those who experienced the system are survivors who very eloquently came and joined us and shared their stories here. If they are not at the table, then we are doing a disservice to all who we are serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Getting a lot of snaps and love. Thank you, Missy.
I want to add something to what Joyce said. I'm sorry, I'm jumping right in. I actually did not, what she's saying, I did not even know. And I've been advocating for 3-4 years now. That's crazy. We do need to know our rights because, and when you hear the knock on the door, you just feel like, these people can just come in your life and, and you have no choice. And my vision, based on my experience as a survivor, in that moment, we want you to listen to us, and then we're hoping that you can help us with what we need in the moment, instead of taking away what we have left. Because frankly, in my experience, what I went through, I had nothing left, and then for someone to come in and just try and take my kids from me, like, that's not right. And so I believe that foster care, thank God that I didn't have my children taken to foster care, but mandate reporting and foster care should be the last option and not the first response, because it does more damage than good.
Thank you, Selena. Charlene and Teresa, I'm going to come back around to you. I am going to come. Oh, you want to go right now?
No, I just wanted to add. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I did not know too, like what Joyce said, because in our communities we are so fearful, and we are practically taught that we have to open the doors or else, and that's another thing. When we do open these doors, we're getting involved with the child welfare system. The biases that's already made, saying that you're a woman that just suffered violence, they already come and they already making these judgment call about you. They judge you because you're a victim of domestic violence. They're judging you because of the color of your skin, of your neighborhood, your culture. They're judging you just for your financial situation. So I think those biases need to be looked into, and how we could get like child welfare workers to better work with families that you come in contact with, and offer the service before you seek a court order to remove children. Offer services, give those support. And when they do remove the children after the court order, they should be a prompt return when this court ordered them to do that. So we got to work on those judgments and those biases that we come across as survivors of violence.
Thank you, Charlene. Teresa.
Lisa, just real quickly, I just want to, absolutely hands down what everybody is saying is spot on. Just even touching on what Charlene was saying about that initial immediate judgment. We are initially looked at as we are criminal, as though we have done something wrong in a domestic violence case, that we are criminalized as for being addicted. We are criminalized in the sense of, this automatic judgment of we're neglectful of our children, that we are being judged that we aren't able to keep our children safe. And if we decriminalize the system as a whole and looked at as who we are, and we are victims to the circumstance. We are victims to poverty. We are victims to the domestic violence. Even, you know, in my situation, being an addict, I didn't choose to be an addict. Just like somebody with diabetes does not choose to be a diabetic. And rather than criminalizing me for those circumstances, you know, and come in with a more empathetic and sympathetic view of who I am as a human being and as a mother, and not look at me as automatically being this horrible mom who had a child who was molested. There again, I was criminalized. It was my fault, and it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm going to turn it back to policymakers for other ideas. We heard from Claire about reorienting the safety net so concrete resources are made available first. Would anyone else on the policymaker team want to add to that? Ideas? What can we do? Actions?
One of the things we can do is stop surveilling families for the purpose of separating them. Because if we listen to what survivors are saying, they thought that help was on the way, but what they got instead was more trauma. So we should have mandated supporters, not mandated reporters. Especially
yes.
We know the system is failing our children and families. Why would we then have someone mandated to report them, to put them in that situation?
Right.
Why not
Thank you.
provide resources by supporting them?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I would like to add, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would like to add also, I think it's a good idea for when there's task force and advisory boards dealing with children of color in the child welfare system. Why don't we have survivors on that board? Why aren't first line workers and advocates invited to the table when policies are being made that's directly affecting Black and brown children at a higher rate, as we all know? Why aren't those who are greatly affected, why are they not there? Why are not the first line workers, why are not advocates speaking at that table as these decisions are being made over our children and over our families, over our community? So I think that needs to be added. I also agree with what everyone else is saying in regards to resources. How am I supposed to reach out for a resource to assist me that I didn't even know existed? You know, so these resources need to be made known to the community as well as their rights. That's why we make sure that we make everyone know all their rights in child protection. There's a CPL book, which is Child Protection Law. It's free. You can go to any child protection services and ask for a CPL book, you know, and that has all the laws and all the, you know, the neglect, abuse, everything in there. So you can read a verbatim of what you're being accused of. Also, I think it's important for the community to have access to that, because as we know, policy can be a little vague. And I think with that vagueness of policy, I think that opens the book for the implicit biases. So because you got allegations, you know, that I may not have food in my home, but you come to my house and now you're afraid of the neighborhood. And now my children are neglected. And now you have to, as Joyce so eloquently said, you're policing my family now because you came to the neighborhood and you're afraid. So now you're policing me, and your implicit biases are now stepping in to tell me that I'm not able to provide for my family or my children, when this community is probably what's keeping me together, because my next door neighbor is probably going to bring me some food, or we're going to do a community potluck, whatever it is. We have to ask those questions also. So I think one of the biggest thing for prevention is adding the survivors, the community members, the advocates, the first line workers to some of these advisory boards, to some of these task force when these policies and decisions are being made for our community.
Thank you, Lucetta. So policymakers, I want to hear from Asia and Julian about this front door issue, right? There's implicit bias, there's racism that's impacting how families get pushed into the system, how decisions are made about who to file on, who to report on, and then how to respond. How do we shift this to get concrete resources and help to folks at a time when they need it, rather than punitive approaches.
Well, I mean, Issa, my first thought is, why is that the automatic response? Why is it automatic that we have someone who has been harmed and a harm doer, and the automatic response is from, you know, NYPD or whomever? Because I've been through it in some ways or another with family members, where the automatic response is, you know, we have to call ACS, or there's a prompt from NYPD to file that sort of report. Why can't we stop that as the automatic, the go-to? And then, you know, and also, even if you put the resources up front, first of all, who are we relying on to give us the resources? We're going to rely on NYPD to say, hey, there's a problem here. Here are the resources, because I don't know that I trust it. We know we have to have people who we trust, organizations who we trust, to give us the information and to lead us into the right resources. And I'm skeptical, just in general. So you'd have to have somebody who I really trusted to help me to feel like, oh, I want to go here and get help for myself, for my children, for my family, right? And that also includes, you know, whatever I may want from my partner. And there are different, you know, I hear different things from different people about, you know, how we help even a harm doer. So why is that the go-to? Why don't we just stop that?
Good question. Why don't we just stop that? Absolutely. And this issue of who presents the resources, who presents the knowledge is really significant in that, right? Because as from the child welfare worker standpoint, I remember that feeling of knocking on the door and sort of saying, we're from government, we're here to help, and people not buying it. So who presents the resource is significant as well. So thank you for that. Julian, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I remember hearing once that if you see something, say something, and I think that's really the wrong approach, right? I think if you see something, you should do something. I mean, part of our challenge is that we have this like us, them mentality, and there are lots of reasons for it. There are lots of unique reasons for it here in the US, but part of it is changing our mindset about who our community and who our people are, and what it means for us to actually do something that's helpful instead of just reporting people that you think are bad or dangerous, right? That's what a reporting system is designed to do. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think we have to fundamentally change that. And there's also a lot of, I think, training and kind of institutional beliefs that we have to challenge, right? So to Asia's point, when the police officer is called, I can tell you in Michigan, it's often how DV cases came to the child welfare system, right? Police were called because of a domestic violence situation, a neighbor called it in. Police arrived. When they saw that a child was there, they automatically called it into the child welfare system. And that's based on training and beliefs that people have about what it means to assure child safety, right? And I think if we now know better, we need to rethink all of how our systems view child safety and ensure that we have different pathways.
Well said. Well said. I think Michelle had her hand up, so I want to let you in on this one as well.
Thank you. So I would just challenge that we need to shift from being punitive to being helpful. So I would just say, Commissioner Chang, that, you know, it's not only the neighbors that are calling it in, but victims are calling it in to get help, and then they're being penalized by that. I don't know how many times I've had community members call me to say that they've called the police to ask for help because their partner's doing something that's violent, and as a result of that, you know, which to me as a judge, that is telling me that they're being protective. But instead, child welfare comes in and sees it as being a risk to the children and remove the children as a knee-jerk reaction. So one program that I created when I was at the Tulalip tribes was I created a couple of programs which embedded social workers into the police department, and you know, I instilled in those outreach workers and social workers that what we're trying to do is meet the people where they are and help them with the service, with access to services, you know, with what they need. That everyone's needs are going to be different. And it was highly successful in it. And we just finished a year in that program, November 1st. But, so if we shift our focus and demand better of us all, because like we heard from our survivors, we're being, judged as, because of the color of our skin, and assumptions are being made. And another thing is, we need to know our rights, but those rights need to be upheld. I see them at times just being, they're checking boxes by advising. And like, for instance, the Indian Child Welfare Act, we have some high standards that courts are supposed to meet, but they're not being met. They're just being, it's being given lip service, or they're being put by the wayside. And so we all need to be accountable. So I love this topic, or I love this, the name of this session, because accountability is required of all of us, not just, survivors.
That's
They
right.
part of the solution. So thank you. Goodness cheese.
Thank you. Claire, I see you had your hand up for a bit. I apologize, I didn't see it.
Oh, no, this is exactly the conversation I think that we all want to have. I want to try and connect a few dots here between Selena and her comment a few minutes ago, where CPS should be the last resort, not the first response, and what we've just been talking about in terms of reorienting and changing who's family facing, who are the trusted people that families can turn to when they need help. And I just want to elevate that there are, at least by my count, 14 states who are shifting their mindset, shifting the paradigm of who they are and what they want to be in wanting to support families, in wanting to be part of the solution, in wanting to shift their resources to prevention, and have articulated in their family first plans that have been sent to the Children's Bureau a community pathway that would, in many instances, create the mechanisms and the funding pathways to resource community, to be the resource to families. We are seeing some plans say, we don't think a hotline report is needed to get services and supports to families. We want to make sure that if a family comes to our attention, that we are sending them back to the community and resourcing communities and trusted partners to be supportive. That cannot happen, however, without co-design and listening closely to families, to survivors, to youth, to communities, so that we are moving from a punitive framework into a helpful framework and orienting resources around it. But it's interesting to think through all the mechanisms that are right in front of us now that could be reoriented. And we're starting to see states say, I want to be bold. I want to be part of the solution. We have we have many, many, many resources, and we want to stop investing in the infrastructure of the Child Welfare Agency and invest in families.
Thank you,
I
Claire.
wanted to see if I could jump in. This is Aurora Martinez.
I was going to call on you next, saying I missed your voice in this, so please.
Yes. So, I absolutely understand that thought, and especially of some states wanting to be bold. But the reality is sometimes our states are dealing with such other big issues that really working to solve problems isn't at the front of their plate. It's not at the front of their mind. It is not their priority. They're barely hanging on. In my state, we have a child placement crisis. I have kids sleeping at CPS offices. So I'm not really feeling too optimistic that we're addressing equity issues and prevention issues and the way that we should be. In addition to that, my state has not been very good on mental health support in general for children and for parents. And that's just kind of across the board, not even specific to child welfare. My legislature hasn't done things that they need to do in order to make sure that we have that even available to children and parents. And that's one of the key issues that continues some cycles of children and parents coming into the system. So I do think that the community has to demand it. We have to demand it from our state. We have to demand it from our governors and our legislatures. And we have to show that we need investments where investments are going to help, even if it doesn't sound like it's directly child welfare related. Helping to improve the health of the community is helping child welfare. It's keeping families together and it's giving them what they need so they can actually thrive in the community, not just survive through it, but thrive. So that is one of the thoughts that I've had in as a judge, being a part of a system, also working on collaboratives that are community-based so that I'm listening and being informed by communities, but I'm also helping to direct the ways in which we get the attention of the people who are in systems, how we get the attention of the people who need to invest in the right places and have the voices of the people who don't normally get their voices heard highlighted on my platforms, since they often don't always get their own platforms highlighted. But those continued collaborations and bringing information from community sources as well, because I know if my state agency puts out information, I can't guarantee that the families trust that information. So we really need to be mindful of all the ways in which we may not be really helpful, even though our intentions may be in some of the states that are not wanting to be as bold as they could be as well. And so we have to think about all of those places as well.
Thank you, Aurora, for that. That's a helpful check because not all things are equal, right? There's not equity across states. So how are the resources distributed to make sure that there's equity in terms of who gets access to it? The other thing you said that's super significant is what does it look like for policymakers to be active in your communities? I think having tables and having families and survivors at the table, but oftentimes we bring folks into our meetings to be the one voice, to be that representative. But what does it look like to be that example, like you're saying, that I'm also out there in community, having relationships with people? I think both are necessary and important. And Lachetta, I see you. What would you like to add to this?
I just wanted to add, one thought of getting the information out, just like there's a 1-800 hotline to call in allegations of abuse and neglect. Why can't we create a 1-800 hotline for communities, resources, services? When I need help, I call the hotline to get this help. And make sure that it's funded and it can be resources available from all the grassroots organization, mega organization within the community, and try to get something like that together because that's who the people will trust. If I call this number that's not related to child welfare, I'm calling a different number. I'm going to speak to someone that's in my community that have lived experience and understand my culture. And request help, then I believe and I'm more faithful that I will actually get help and not harm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, some of this we've heard in dialogue 1 and dialogue 2. This is about our actions, right? What can we commit to? Big, bold ideas, right? This moment of transformation that the Vice President talked about. So I love that. Love the ideas. Anyone else on the survivor or advocate group want to respond to this or react, right? You're our check and balance. Does this seem reasonable and make sense to you?
Yes, I would like to respond, Issa, because I appreciate everything that everyone's saying, but I don't believe what we are saying is getting to the core of the problem. And the core of the problem, honestly, is ending slavery. We keep asking, why do we have punitive systems? And we keep fighting marginally, right, in the middle, after the fact, to interrupt what is already at play. But what we have to do is interrupt the foundation. Racism is built into the foundation of America. We still have slavery in America. People keep forgetting that 13th Amendment that says the only way to have slaves in this country is through incarceration. We keep forgetting that we now have mass incarceration. We keep forgetting that all of these other systems set people up for failure to have them end up being incarcerated. Every call that's made to report a family, I believe that child welfare across the 50 states is the biggest problem because it's the umbrella. They claim to partner with the school system. What that partnership does not mean keeping kids safe, as they say. That partnership means reporting a family to us, right? CPS, ACS, whomever it is, who will then take punitive action, separate the family, and set the child up for horrible outcomes. Suspending Black children instead of giving them time out and the other things that we give our white counterparts is setting our children up for failure. Food deserts are setting our children up for failure. Every single thing and every place we go, there's many survivors of DV on this webinar today. When we look at that, even in New York, the main place to go is Safe Horizons. I've had several families reach out to Safe Horizons for assistance, and what did they get? They got reported. So until we change the punitive nature that is built into the racism to keep the slaves in this country, we will always have what we have. We can think about the laws, but we need to think about the foundation. We need to think about constitutional changes like that 13th Amendment, 1/3 of a man, and a few other things that we're not acknowledging and that we're dancing around. And I think that's where the real change is going to happen. And as far as mandated reporters, I just want to say we have to repeal CAPTA. That's another one of those things. We ask, why do we have mandated reporters? We have mandated reporters because CAPTA says we have to have them, but it doesn't have to look the way that it looks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you. Thank you. We, that's the goal. We said in terms of the values, we want to get at the root, right? So addressing some of these, bringing it out from behind the shadows and calling it what it is important. Cut back to dialogue one, truth, right? Justice is truth. So Selena, I see your hand up. What can you add right now?
I agree with what Joyce says, and as well as the Chetta. It's a bigger picture in all of this, and the reality is that, for example, in my case, I remember I was afraid to you're even afraid to be honest to your own social worker or your own DV social worker, because they're all mandate reporters. And so you have in the back of your mind, if I tell you what I'm going through, you're going to report me. And this needs to be, and also reporting it is another thing, because right away, it's the first response. They call it child welfare system, and we need to create a system where calling the child welfare system shouldn't be the first mandate reporting. It shouldn't be the first response, is what I said earlier. And there's so much weight on this name. The child welfare system carries on a very heavy, to me, when I think about the child welfare system, I think about a system that is known to cause fear and tearing families apart. And so what I think is that, I know this, I agree that we need to dismantle the system and create a new system that will support families. Because as soon as you hear child welfare system, you feel fearful, and that shouldn't have to happen. You shouldn't feel fearful to even hear that name. But unfortunately, it carries so much weight, and it's I can't explain myself, but it's hurt so much families that it's already has a bad reputation. And so I do agree with Luchetta that when it comes to the mandate reporting, there should be a hotline. But I do feel like, I know that could be helpful, but I do feel like dismantling the system would be the biggest change that would have to occur in order to create a new system that we need, that is based on the family's needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Selena. Again, powerful. We're all breathing together. This is our lives. This is our children. This is our families. This is our work. This is our movement. So just encourage us all to take a deep breath together as we move to the next question. We've talked about shrinking the front door. Now, what are the most important changes and opportunities when survivors are currently involved, when survivors are involved? Again, we're going to go back around policymakers and come back to the survivor team. Asia, what would you say? Once people are involved, how do we minimize the harm?
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations about making sure that there are trustworthy resources up front at the front door. And, you know, we say this all the time, but, you know, when we know it to be true, but there's some transformation that has to happen with the people that are in the system, the people that actually knock on the door, the supervisors that are actually making the decisions about whether or not to file an Article 10 or do we remove children from all that they know. You know, and we know that even when children, let's say they're not in great circumstances or parents are struggling for whatever reason, that children still want to be with their parents and they still want to be close to their family. So, you know, okay, there's been a knock at the door has been opened, whether the parents know their rights or not. And now you have, okay, we can make sure that the family has resources. We have to decide whether or not we're putting forth the trustworthy resources by the trustworthy people. I really appreciate that comment around having social workers integrated within the NYPD, but I don't know if I would trust that, because I'd be like, you know what I mean, within the police department. I'm sorry, I didn't say, but you know, you work for the police department, so I would still be wondering. So you have that there, but also what are we saying to the people who are knocking on the door? How are we transforming them? And I have to say, in New York City, where I come from, you know, the vast majority of the child welfare specialists, they come to this work wanting to help children and families, and they often have to strike this balance of, I want to help children and families, but I have these rules that I have to follow for whatever reason. And then, of course, somewhere in between, you have bias. You even have bias, black on black bias. So, okay, you're poor. You didn't raise your child the way that I would have raised mine, or your child is dressed not in a way that I think is inappropriate. So there's got to be some transformation in terms of who the child welfare system really is and who the leadership of the child welfare system is. Because I believe that there's a trickle down from there, that we really do need to diversify the leadership, have people who have lived experience, have been impacted by the system in one way or another, who can help to transform the system from the inside.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm going to send out a reminder to all of us that I see the interpreters doing this, which is telling us to slow it down just a little bit. And I know I'm a New Yorker too, and once I get talking and I get interested and excited about something, so yes, just a quick reminder. Ju, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I mean, once the family is identified, gets involved with the system, I think to Asia's point, we have to really reorient our staff and our options, right? So Asia's right. I mean, first of all, you've got really young people, often without, cultural experience. And this is a fear-based system, right? I mean, the worker is so afraid of the case that they're going to miss, that will end up in the headlines of the paper. They'll get fired. In Michigan, we had workers who are criminally prosecuted for leaving a child with her mom, who then later died, right? I mean, this is a vicious system in so many ways. And it creates a type of terrible cycle of fear and just covering one's own backs, right? And it takes out of the center the child, who I think we all need to put back into the center of the work. And, you know, I can tell you my cultural bias being first generation Korean American is, you know, family is so central to your identity and your sense of safety, right? And I think one of the things that we can do for kids who are part of our system is to say, how do I involve the larger extended family in this case to offer this child the supports that they need? How do I ask that question first instead of thinking that the answer is separation? I mean, I think, you know, to build on what others are saying is that, and I've been saying this for a while, and sometimes I have to check myself because I'm part of that system. Is that, you know, I think child welfare in many ways, the notion of family separation is trying to help people on the cheap, right? Like, we don't want to see the problem anymore. So we think if we just take that child outside of the equation that brought them to our attention, then I can say I did something and keep going on about my business. I think the more challenging dynamic, if we are willing to take it on, is to say, how do I treat this family as if they were my family? And how do I give them the support that I would want someone to give to me? And that's not easy, right? It carries inherent risk, and it's messier, it sticks around longer. It requires us to do more community building and working with our behavioral health providers, like the judge said, and substance use providers, right? It's a messier kind of work, but I think we have to be willing to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Aurora.
You know, I think it's hard to talk about people who are already in the system because it is an imperfect and unfair system. But I think that we have to encourage leadership. I think, like other judges, should do the things that I do in changing the culture and changing the way that we are supporting families when they're already involved. Now, I'm already dealing in a system that I know is inequitable, but I have the power of the judiciary, and I can make certain decisions, and I can make sure that we're doing the best with what we have in the moment. And so, you know, the hard thing is when I sometimes visit with different communities and they say, what if our judge isn't like you? Then what are we to do? And I said, you know, leadership comes in a bunch of ways, and it can be top down or it can be down up. And I can tell you, if I'm a judge in a community and the whole community is approaching my court and the system one way, I'm going to try and get on board with what they're saying. I'm going to have to learn their language. I'm going to have to understand what's going on. And so if you can get together as the community to force the change, if your judge is not yet in that space, then the judge is not going to be the one left out, not knowing what's going on. And I believe that they will move into the direction of change. That, or you make sure that you're electing judges, or if you're in a jurisdiction with appointed judges, the people who appoint them, make sure you know what they're about so that you get good people in these positions. In my community, we are elected, and I have to answer to the people. The people are my boss. And I'm not going to try and do something that is against my boss, the people who elected me. And I think we need to have that kind of perspective, particularly as elected individuals, because we already, I don't have to be mandated by my legislature to do certain things. There are best practices, there are better approaches that I should do and I can do without having to be mandated by law. And we need to highlight those things so that others know what can be done without having to be mandated to do it.
Absolutely, well said. And I just want to underscore that community organizing works, voting works. That is right where the power is in many ways. Michelle, would you like to respond to this as well? How can we transform what happens to families, survivors, particularly when they're already in the system?
Yeah, you know, I think the system, we're so desensitized to what they're experiencing and how they're feeling. Like Zhu Chang said, we had to think about how would we feel if we were in that situation. You know, it's such a disengaged system in some ways. You know, the cases are before you for that moment, but then there are so many cases, or there's so few resources that I fear that people don't give the time that's necessary to these cases and consideration. And so what I think is really vital is having more family wellness court options. We had that at the Tulalip tribes. We had a family wellness court. We staffed things weekly. We heard cases weekly. I mean, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources, but we had some tremendous results. And these are children that we're talking about. And the sooner we can get children and families reunited, the better our system will be long-term. And so we need to have that transformative change to think about how to, what we're trying to achieve in trying to figure out how to get there, rather than just accept status quo hearings. A lot of states have long time periods between hearings, and case managers, they're overworked. There's a lot of turnover there, and they're in crisis mode. They're responding to the cases that are right in front of them and addressing the hearings that are upcoming. And so, without resources, without creating systems that actually will transform from a punitive system to a healing and wellness system, we're doing a disservice to our families. They deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. And become aware that Julian needs to leave. I want to make sure you get an opportunity to be thanked appropriately and to make any last comments you'd like to make.
Oh, I just wanted to thank everyone who put this series together for the opportunity to join you and listen in. I've learned a lot, and I've been thinking about what I can do differently and do better. And so thank you for all of the organizers, and a special thanks to the advocates and the leaders making a difference today. And special thanks to our survivors who are still in the fight and are so courageous to share your stories. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Claire, we're going to wrap up this section with you, not the section, but just the policymaker comments.
Yeah.
What can we do differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pivot a little bit. Most people have been answering your question in a really straightforward way. What do we do once families are known to child welfare? I'm going to take 75 years step backwards for a moment and highlight the policy choices, the policy choice points that we come to in this country. We often come to this moment where we can either invest and resource families or create more infrastructure to seek out parents who are not raising their children in ways that are consistent with a set of standards. As early as 1935, the founders of the Children's Bureau knew and understood that economic and concrete supports were critical in the service delivery to support parents. And that was separated for political reasons and choices, the economic supports from the social services. Again, in the early 60s, when it was decided that unsuitable families, that you could not withhold economic supports from them, and instead you needed to resource families to make them more suitable. At that point, we created a funding stream to place children in foster care, an open-ended entitlement, rather than investing in families. With CAPTA, as was noted earlier, the choice point at that moment was to create a cadre of mandated reporters, or to pass the Comprehensive Child Development Act, which was vetoed. It would have provided, universal child care to families. In Family First, our most recent piece of child welfare legislation, we have again separated out economic and concrete supports from mental health, substance abuse, and parenting. And so we come to this choice point over and over and over again. And we make the decision as a nation to create and support interventions that, as everyone on this call who were survivors on the first day said, it didn't feel like help. A different kind of help would have been useful. I want to bring everyone's attention to a new study out in pediatrics this month that talks about those kinds of investments and what it would look like. An additional $1,000 that states spend annually on public benefit programs per person living in poverty is associated with a 2% reduction in foster care placements. If those dollars, that $1,000 per person in poverty, is spent on child care specifically, the reductions in foster care are dramatic. If money is spent on foster care, there's actually a negative return on investment. For every $1 that is spent, there is a negative return on that investment. And so I want us to encourage us to think not only about what the people inside the system do, but the set of policy choices that are worth understanding and being part of the transformative moment that we have in front of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. And what I want to say, the person you were referencing was Joyce, who talked about CAPTA.
Thank you, Joyce. Yes.
And I see your comments as very connected, because what Joyce is saying is that this is not an accident. So those moments, those legislative choice points where the decision was made to move towards punishment rather than support, that supports a larger agenda, such as Joyce was supposing around mass incarceration, right? So there's no real design to lift children and families out of poverty and into wellness, right? It's just another way to sort of trap people in a cycle of poverty and enslavement. So in some ways, I see your comments as very connected and as having root in the same change, a larger societal change. But I know Selena's trying to get in here. I know, so I don't want to usurp your time. And then I'll come back to you, Joyce, if that's okay.
No, I just wanted to clarify that because what I meant earlier was I just wanted to express that the fear connected to the child welfare system. That's all I wanted to connect with DV agencies and the child welfare system, is the fear that of opening up, because that's something that I went through, and I live in Illinois, so I believe that the DV agencies are mandate reporters in this state. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's my specific experience. I'm sorry if some were triggered. But in my case, I was afraid to open up, and that should not be. You should not be afraid to open up to a social worker or anyone about what you're going through, especially if you're trying to heal. And so that was what I was trying to say was connect the two, the fear of opening up. So thank you. Sorry.
Don't be sorry, not at all. I see Lachetta's hand. We want to come back to Joyce at some point, but I haven't forgotten you. You raised your hand. Go for it.
Me?
Lachetta had her hand up.
Yep, I was gonna let Joyce go because you did say Joyce first. And then
No, I
just
did,
wanted to-
but I did. I thought you were gonna put your hand up to what Selena said, so that's why.
No, I'm right after Joyce.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. I just want to say that a lot of movements built themselves on the back of the civil rights movement, right? And a lot of movements have progressed, utilizing the language, the tactics, the organizing skills, and different things that really grew from that movement, which was a massive movement. One of the movements that grew and was very successful was the LGBTQ movement. They utilized the language a lot about being in a closet and having to be afraid to be who they are and share their true life experiences. Well, I need now to draw the link between that movement and the movement of parents who are saying we no longer want to be in the closet, hiding our situations. We want to be able to tell the truth about who we are and what it is that we're experiencing without backlash, punitive actions, judgment, and most importantly, without the threat of our children being separated from us. And I just want to mention real quick where Biden is looking to pay people who had their children removed at the border over $400,000 per person. Again, ignoring what we have been doing in this country domestically since I can remember, since the orphan trains, through chattel slavery. But we still have not received any reparations for anything that has happened to us. And it's a slap in the face to keep us in a closet, afraid to share what's happening, afraid to ask for help, which is the real ability to keep children safe, because then you're not struggling alone, you have supports. There's been no one that I've ever met in this lifetime or seen who has been successful without having supports. And so when we create these type of mechanisms built around fear and punitive actions, we do the very opposite of what we claim we want. And that's one of the things about systems. They throw the ball with the left hand and make you look right. What they say and what they do are two different things. They are not working to keep kids safe. They are working to separate families, to harm Black people, and to increase slavery in this country.
Thank you. So we're going to come back around to the survivor panel, starting with Charlene, then
Oh, wait.
Teresa. Oh,
Yeah, I wanted to go after.
oh
Joyce,
yes,
I'm
that's
sorry.
right. See, so many good comments. I'm losing track. Please, Shaletta, go ahead.
That's
Go,
okay.
Chetta.
Yeah, I just wanted to say main thing that I think we can invest in families, like Claire said, we need to provide some sort of financial support. As you know, when a child is removed, one child, the state will pay anywhere between $800 up to $12,000 a month, depending on what level of security that child is in, whether it's in a licensed foster home opposed to a residential placement. So if we can spend that much money and we already know we're going to get a negative return on it, why can't we invest in our families, invest in their villages? Why can't we take some of that money and give these parents and these families some sort of stipend to assist them with their real needs, not providing cookie cutter services? Ask the child, what do you need? Ask the parents and the family, what do you need? And then base services and the financial assistance around their needs. If it is childcare, we can spend $12,000 on some kids in foster care, removing a child. That's not including medical needs and services and specialized services. That's just for housing per month. So just imagine what we can do with that, giving it to the family, allowing the family to utilize their own communities, their own villages, to assist them and to thrive, to help those children thrive in their own community, in their own home, in their own familiarity with the love of their parents, their siblings, their grandparents, or the neighbors, whatever their village may look like. It may be a school teacher, but let's invest in families and let's give them stipends instead of saying the best thing for us to do is to rip them out of their homes. Also, I think we should put kids first and families first by being transparent with them. On one of the slides, a survivor mentioned that, CPS changed workers like they change shoes without giving knowledge to the clients and the survivors that they have a new worker, and now they feel like they have to start all over. With working in that field, that is such a true statement. Everything is going so fast, and there's an inside statement that says you're going to err on the side of the child, which means if it's up toss of removing, go ahead and remove so you can err on the side of the child. Because if you don't and something happens, then like Miss Yu said, that worker can be prosecuted. But erring on the side of the child and removing a child, that's not putting children's first. That's not putting families first. That sounds like that's putting the workers first. And that's not what the system was, what you're supposed to be doing when you're in there, supposed to be trying to keep families together. So let's focus on financial stability or just financial support. Because we know some of the numbers. I think it said, I tried to write it down, $1,000 spent on public housing benefits. It was a 4% decrease in substantiated cases. So just think how much more we can get decreased if we actually took that money from foster care and actually gave it to the parents and helped them that way.
Thank you, Lachetta. Thank you. Missy, I see you have your hand up as well. Then we're going to come back around to everyone in the interest of time.
Right. I will try to be quick here. I think, as everyone else was talking, the word that continues to come to my mind, and I think we heard it across the other two series that we had shared as well, is accountability. And when I think about accountability, I think about a two-way trust-based relationship. We tend to throw the word around quite a bit. And I think for many of the points that were made today is it really doesn't seem as though it's two-way or trust-based, right? Especially when you're talking about a system. And so to really make that shift and transform and reimagine what we're doing, we have to be very intentional in our planning and start to think about these items at a deeper level, and not just based off of our work experience, but actual lived experiences of those that are the most impacted. I think the other piece is we actually have to take action. And so for so many years, I've been working in child welfare, and quite frankly, I'm tired of telling the story, or our survivors shouldn't have to come back 10 more times to tell their story, but that you've heard it. And now how are we going to take action on what we've heard? I think the other piece is that many of us didn't sign up for this work to disproportionately impact kids of color, to see and really manifest inequities each and every day. We signed up for it because we cared about children and families, but somewhere in the mix of our history and systems is we've lost touch on humanity. And oftentimes we think, even as we talk about cases and instances, it's numbers, it's case number BFL whatever, and not even a name of the actual humans who we are impacting. And so really being intentional of how we start to shift and move and do our work differently. I think absolutely, Lachetta, hearing you talking about the funds and resources need to be invested in community. And we need to ask them what it is that they truly do need. Culturally responsive services need just as much weight and credit as evidence-based practices, because we know within our communities what works, but no one is coming to our communities to really see what are the true services that we might need. I think the last piece I have is task force, planning committees, advisory committees. We very much have to be intentional of who's sitting around the table. And, as Claire was talking about family first, I really thought about, I'm part of the Oregon Policy and Practice Work Group for Family First. And what I love about the meeting is it's finally a space I can go into that I feel like it's different. That we've asked our Oregon tribes, what is working in your prevention programs? Because we may not know what is best for all. And so to actually go out to community and say, what is it that's working within your community that we may be able to take and model within our state system? You have relief nurseries, which is our prevention leg here in Oregon. And they're at the table to say, here's what we do and how we work with families. We have equity champions. We have parent mentors who have a very large voice within that space of our planning. We have self-sufficiency workers who are leading and supervising family coaches. So what might be working in another system that we could model and bring over to the child welfare system that is prevention, not intervention, right? And so I just think about this as we have to be accountable to what we say we're going to do, because communities need us to do that. And it starts with each and every one of us who are making those decisions every day.
Thank you so much, Missy. Well said. And it reminds me of something Claire said also, that the strategies are right there in front of us. They're happening in different communities. They're happening in different places, right? And is there an investment and the public will and the legislative will to do them, as opposed to continue doing more of the same? What's that intention? Just in the interest of time, everyone, we want to make sure that we open with the voice of survivors and that we close with the voice of our survivor leader panel. So we want to go around to make sure you all have last words in terms of anything you heard, commitments, actions. How does it resonate for you? And what, if anything, else do we need to do? Where do we need to go next?
I can go. Oh, go ahead, Charlene.
So I was thinking about everything, and I think a lot of us say the same thing, just the wordings are differently. We're in a time where both the child welfare system or child welfare workers are fearful, and they're coming into our homes and we're fearful. So that's like two set of people very fearful. And it doesn't help the child welfare worker to make that sensitive decision around the family, because now they're fearful of their jobs. They're not thinking about the family at hand, and they're not thinking about children here. So my case where they come in, domestic violence, and they get all shook up and grab the kids away, which makes no sense, because I think this is where, not because of domestic violence, you should just move children, but that's the time you should put yourself in the position to support the family, keep them together, try your best to keep them together. Unless there's some cases where mothers do ask, say, you know, I'm not able to take care of the child right now, you can provide that sort of help. And the sad thing about that, when they do remove the children from your home and put them in foster care, there's some kids who end up in foster care and aged out of foster care, and there've been no follow-up. They're just let loose after. What you do with them, you send them out there, and that's where the prison come in. And that's where we go down this pathway where it never stops. It's just like from youth to adulthood, and our life just taken away from us, or you design a life for us that is not really fulfilling or fruitful, you know. But as I listen, and I think Lachetta said it too, you need our voices at the table. You cannot make decisions for us without us being there, because you never experienced it. You don't have any idea. No many books you read cannot really give you that real life experience that we do. So you have to trust our survivors' voices. You have to collaborate. When we talk about transformational changes, that will be your key right there. Having us to sit, trust us that we can bring to you something that you make right decisions for the families and survivors.
Getting a lot of snaps. Thank you. Thank you. Just gonna go with you next, Selena, and then close it with Teresa, I believe.
Yeah, I'm snapping my fingers too. That's very true. I agree with everything Charlene says. It's very important that we need to hear the efforts that the families are doing for their children, because many cases, in my case, my efforts weren't listened to. So even though I had everything, besides of what I was going through, I was a great mom, and I am a great mom. But I was going to school, everything, and none of my efforts were put first. And that's something that really hurt me, because they didn't listen to what I needed or what I did at the time for my family. It was just, they did their decisions for me. And that was something that is hurtful. And I agree with Charlene. They need to listen to what we need, and our based on our needs. So I can't add more to it because she said it all. Thank you, Charlene.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Teresa?
There's a lot of big shoes to fill today. I think the idea of accountability is, I don't want it to turn into what Missy is saying is it being somewhat of a buzzword. I want it to be where there is actual accountability to not only us as survivors, but also to the people that work within the system. There is no accountability. There's no accountability for CPS workers who screw up a case or don't provide the assistance for a visit or for childcare. There's no accountability to their supervisors. So I don't want it to turn into this dialogue where we're just talking about a buzzword. I want it to be an action. And like Selena and Charlene are saying, hear our voices, hear our needs. I am a mother of a child who is in the system today. She is not in my care today because there was no accountability within my case. And when I try to reimagine what it would look like if things were different, it's hard for me to pass over the PTSD that I experience all the time, because I want to reach out and I want to ask for help, but I am scared. I'm scared, and I don't know what services to ask for. I don't know what resources to ask for. And so being an advocate and a parent mentor at the ICWA Law Center, I thankfully have some experience to be able to know what services to go reach out for and ask for myself in my community. My community is what's providing me the resources that I need. And, if we take away from the mass amount of dollars that are given to foster care and to the child welfare system to continuously take away children versus providing the funding, even just $1,000 a month, what a massive amount of change and difference that can make in a family's life. Instead of padding the pockets of, potential abusers, and harm doers that are working within our system. My child, is too a survivor of the child welfare system, and now she's just heading right down the pipeline of heading right into prison if things don't change in her life. She is incarcerated as a 13-year-old. Wrap your minds around that. My child is a 13-year-old who I watched a day before our first dialogue get brought into a home where she was shackled. My daughter was shackled because she has mental health issues that are results of the child welfare system. That is my heart, and that is my voice. And I reach out for my daughter, and I reach out for the families that I work with. This wasn't supposed to be a tearful session. This is my heart. I want to see change. I want to see it within my lifetime. I would love, 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 Joyce, if we could see abolishment. like you talked about on day one, on day two. But unfortunately, I don't know if that is ever going to happen in my lifetime. So what can we do to change it now, today? Mandated reporting, how is that being helpful? There's no accountability for the mandated reporters. There's revenge calls. There's people who are so scared to lose their jobs that they're just making call after call after call, and our lives are being destroyed because of it. There's no accountability there. What can we do as policymakers, as advocates, as people who love our families to create change today?
Teresa, thank you so much. Wish we were kind of physically in person for a hug. My also love and hugs go out to Jay, who I know is with us and listening, and to Patrice for all your amazing support. I just thank you. You've given us all a gift with sharing your leadership and your stories and your experiences. And thank you. As we have very few minutes left, right? You all are asking a very important question. What can we do? What are we going to do? And I just want to give you, as we close and say goodbye, Asia, if there's any final commitments, right? This whole group and this whole room wants to hear what can be done and what's going to be done about this.
So I think, well, first I want to say, I want to just acknowledge, I think what Joyce and some others were saying about the history, particularly the history of the way this country has treated Black and Native people, right? This country doesn't value Black lives. Issa, you have Black Lives Matter right behind you so that we are reminded of it, but this country doesn't value Black lives. So until and if that happens, I don't know how much we can rely on that. This administration will do everything that it can toward equity for survivors and for others. But there's some other things that, for example, in my position, I don't have control over. We're talking about CAPTA. You know, when was the last time, you know, we all marched to our legislator's office, called our senators, our representatives, and said, this is what we need. We want CAPTA to look different, and here's how we need for it to look different. You know, I heard the judge talking, and someone said to her, what if we don't get a judge like you? We need to diversify the judiciary. And in some places, judges are elected, in some places they're appointed, in some places they're both. But we need to be participating in those types of elections and supporting the candidates that we think are going to help us to make the change that need to be made. I'm glad to be here in this room. I'm happy to think more about like what it is I can do, what I have control over, or what you and I can really, really do from the federal level to support change. I know people are at least listening to what I have to say, so maybe there's that, but also to strategize about really how you push the system to change from the outside. Because you know, without the value of Black lives, the value of Native lives, value of Latinx lives, we're always going to have this problem. There's not a lot of white women in here really talking about how they were treated by the system, and so we have to kind of acknowledge that and push against a system that is fine with establishing the status quo. To Teresa, the fact that your daughter, and you know, yes, money. I gave a presentation recently on anti-Black racism, and I talked about universal basic income. I talked about what philanthropy can do. Yes, families need money, but that's not all that we need. We're talking about intergenerational trauma and ACEs scores. We're talking about how you were traumatized and how that trauma is living through your baby, and that also is by design, right? That intergenerational trauma. And so we have to talk about not only about money, but reliable and trustworthy supportive services, mental health and otherwise from our communities and for us, right, by us. So anyway, I'm just, you know, thank you for allowing me to be a part. You know, I hear you on a commitment, but let's talk more about the commitments that I can make that I can keep, that I know that I have control over, and the push that I can be part of to making transformational change, as the Vice President spoke so eloquently about. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That's a movement. It's inside, it's outside allies, it's organizing, it is amplifying voices and having survivors' experiences front and center at the table. So thank you, Asia. It's been a pleasure being with you all today. I just want to thank again the Futures team led by DJ, to Patrice, Tien, Erica, Umi, Ruby, and all the partners for being part of this transformative moment. Please, you will be contacted and get more information, but please keep in touch with this work. Just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us for what has been a truly transformative experience, and wishing you a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.